Hi, folks. Welcome to episode 6 of the second season of the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. My guest today is Whitney Erwin, and we're talking about using Ayurveda to holistically manage menopause. First, a bit about my guest. Whitney is a clinical herbalist and has been the full-time practitioner and owner of Four Seasons Harmony Holistic Health, Healing and Ayurveda since 2015. She applies holistic health and natural medicine to help women with chronic hormonal imbalances to reduce pain, restore balance and vibrant energy, and live a long, healthy life. Whitney provides compassionate listening skills, individually customized treatments based on each client's unique needs, customized clinical herbal recommendations, mind-body healing, and teaching clients practical self-care tools to live in optimum health. Welcome to the podcast, Whitney.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Emma. I'm really grateful to be here.
I'm excited for this. I think this is a conversation that we need to have collectively as women. It's a conversation that's not had enough. So we're going to be talking about using Ayurveda to manage menopause. And as we've said, menopause isn't something that's openly discussed. I was thinking as I was prepping for this podcast, when you are a young girl approaching your teens, there's lots of conversations about periods, what's coming with puberty. Our mothers prep us, if we're fortunate enough to have mothers, our mothers prep us for all of these things. And then we get to my age, which is 43. Nobody talks to you about menopause. And frankly, I'm looking forward to this conversation to be enlightened, because I'm in complete denial about it. I don't know when to expect it. I don't know, am I in perimenopause already? I know nothing about it. And the only conversations I really have with my friends who are a little bit older than me is the fact that quite a lot of the time they feel rage. That's as far as the conversation goes. So can you kick us off by just sharing what the difference between perimenopause and menopause is?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that it is not a topic that is well conversed about. And I think that's really to the detriment of women's health. And so the more conversations we have, I think the better for all women. And so perimenopause is essentially the transition that's leading up to menopause, which is the cessation of your monthly menstrual cycle. So you have no more bleeding. You have to go, by the textbook definition, up to 12 months without any bleeding to technically be in menopause. So the term perimenopause is kind of thrown loosely around, meaning like there can be various interpretations, but my understanding and the way that I practice is that generally, around 30, hormones do start to shift in the unique anatomy of a woman's body. And then that is going to start to change over the years until the full-blown onset of menopause. So there's some perspectives that say it's like 4 to 8 years is especially like the high perimenopausal time. I think a lot of women don't even realize that it's going on if there's no issues for many, many years, but sometimes there can be just full-blown things that start to go awry. And then that's when women start looking for answers and they realize like, oh yeah, I may have had irregular periods now for several years, or suddenly I have this extra weight gain. I don't know why. And I was never like this for the past 20 years. And so they're in that perimenopause time and their body's changing, but it's not quite yet to that menopause state.
Yeah, and but again with that, it's when does it happen? What kind of symptoms are we talking? When we talk irregular periods, I guess is one, but that's also, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because that can be something that fluctuates with stress levels, and yeah, it kind of adds a whole layer of anxiety about the aging process, doesn't it?
Yes, and we're going to talk more about Ayurvedic medicine, and in that very natural and old holistic health philosophy, there's no negative connotation around menopause. So that's one of my big overarching messages, is it doesn't have to be something scary or horrible, but unfortunately it often is for so many women. And I just have streams of women coming in for support around usually the debilitating symptoms, like hot flashes is probably the number one thing that I see. And oftentimes like all day and all night. And suddenly, there's insomnia. Vaginal dryness is a big one. Mentioned like unexplained weight gain, and like all the usual things not working anymore. It's like I'm exercising regularly, I think I'm eating well, but still nothing is changing. And then there's like very specific things depending on different constitutional types. And so there might be just overarching dryness with some women, and there's like super dry skin. They might feel really spacey and lightheaded. Anxiety and depression are really common things to escalate in perimenopause as well. And I mean, on average, most women go through menopause at 51. And, if you were to go through at 40, that's considered like early onset. That is more unusual. So usually your 40s are like the juicy perimenopause time. But yeah.
Oh dear, sorry, I interrupted you with my
Like,
my enthusiastic celebration of it.
yes, no, I actually hope that we can get to the point culturally where we do celebrate and honor it for this amazing and significant rite of passage. And, I mentioned some of the physical changes and a little bit emotionally, but it's just as much of this whole mind, body, spirit transition for women. And so it can be actually this time of great empowerment. And I also see, so usually people reach out to me in clinical practice, like when things aren't going well, or they just want more support to prepare themselves. Another huge motivation is to support their daughters or sisters and other women in their life. Like, okay, I saw somebody in my family, maybe it's their mother or grandmother, and they did not do well, around that time. Like, I just never want to be like that, right? I just want to be as healthy as possible. And so I think the more we have these conversations, the more we support other women, then we can really reclaim that this is such a beautiful and incredible and empowering rite of passage.
Yeah, and I love that you've reframed it like that, because it is, I've been starting to think about it and just think, oh, this aging thing is not that great. And then we've got this menopause coming, which I'm just my head in the sand about entirely, because I would like to stave it off for as long as possible. Because but we're told, aren't we, in the Western culture, that it's going to be awful. You're going to have brittle bones. You're going to have no sex drive. You're going to be angry. You're going to be emotional. And it is not looked at as anything other than bad and something to dread. So it's great that we're reframing it, and to take us from the dread into something more positive. Can you share a little bit about what Ayurveda is? And then we're going to get into how women can more holistically manage menopausal symptoms without just being put on a prescription for HRT.
Yes, and that is a very common kind of like one size fits all narrow start. Like, okay, that is one option. That's great that there's so many other ones as well. And so telling a little bit more about Ayurveda and what do I mean when I throw out that term. It is by a lot of scholars considered to be one of the oldest healing systems in the world. And it does date back at least 5,000 years to historical written texts. And it's considered to be where all forms of modern medicine came out of, or all forms of medicine in general. And so it's universal. It is accessible to everybody. It literally translates in Sanskrit to the science of life and longevity. And so this is a blueprint for vibrant health and wellness. And it's also the sister healing science to yoga. So this has been practiced successfully and stayed intact for many thousands of years, but it's also considered to be way beyond anything written. So like in oral lineage teachings, like it was traditionally passed on from teacher to student, it's said to go back at least 40,000 years.
Wow. Okay. So we're and I enjoy this because I've recently, in the last 18 months, been working with a shaman, and I've got into shamanic journeying and plant medicine. And we've, in our scientific, very patriarchal world, we've lost touch with the innate and old schools of healing that are still very relevant, and actually I think sometimes a lot gentler and a lot more useful. So I think it's wonderful that we're still tapping this ancient science, really.
Yes, absolutely. And there's lots of energy healing and Reiki that also is included in Ayurvedic medicine. And it also includes the original texts and references on surgery. So it's kind of like everything you can think of under the sun with fields of medicine, but it's absolutely considering the subtle body. And I see a lot of Ayurvedic practitioners that have shamanic practices as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm very excited. So as we're recording this, by the time this goes out, I'll have done it. But on Saturday, I'm going to do a soul retrieval course with the shaman. So I'm looking forward to retrieving my own bits of soul and also learning more about how I could possibly use it to help my clients as well. The more I've delved into the more natural healing modalities, the more I lean on that because it works. I think the trouble with it is it's not a fast solution like popping a pill. And Ayurveda is a way of life, I imagine, for people once they start to use the practices. So without me drifting off into plant medicine, because I could get very tripped up with talking about that. How do you use Ayurveda specifically to help women who are navigating the hormonal changes and the life changes and the physical changes of perimenopause and menopause?
Oh, yes, I find it to be so incredibly beneficial and relevant to all women, but especially when we're looking at optimal support for perimenopause and then going with hopefully the highest trajectory of how can this be a really smooth and healthy and vibrant time in life. And so it's a natural transition that eventually the body is not going to conceive life, and eventually the ovaries are going to reduce their production of especially like estrogen and progesterone, and then saying, okay, it's not time to make a baby anymore. So I think really reclaiming that idea, that's okay. And it is a massive shift though for the women's body. And so leading up to that time does make a huge difference as far as the trajectory of how smooth it will go or not. And nutrition, for example, is highly valued in Ayurvedic medicine. And there's a big emphasis on being conscious about what you take into your body. So not just literally your diet with foods, that is very important, but also like your emotions, your environment, who you're surrounding with. And if you happen to not have enough support for a long period of time, which unfortunately is very common in like modern Western life and like the busy, go, go, go. So if you wear out your adrenal organs and there's this, lower metabolic functioning, then you're setting yourself up to be depleted before your body goes through that massive transition. And so I really look at bringing in Ayurvedic tools in the opposite approach. Okay, how can we bring in the most supportive foods and medicines and herbs to support your unique Ayurvedic dosha type? And also with all the general knowledge of like kind of preparing for what we know is coming. And so your adrenal organs are going to be able to take on that reproductive functioning very well and not start off in a place that is, already burned out or exhausted. And then also psychologically, just really be prepared where you might feel like a more of a burning invitation to focus on spiritual practices or be less engaged with the world. And you might really feel like you need to step into your life purpose more. Like if that's really not ticking for you, you might need to make some massive lifestyle changes, or you might just feel very restless. So there's so much. And that's a little bit of what I do with my women. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love this idea of preparing for what's coming and really it comes back to practicing self-care now rather than practicing self-care when we're broken, which is what a lot of people end up doing and I know I coach people who come to me because they're fed up, they're burnt out, and they're overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of pulling all the pieces back together. And what I hear from what you're saying is actually, if we can not get to that stage by caring for the earthly vehicle more respectfully, now when you're 40, even when you're 30, it makes the transition much much easier. Because I think if you're already going into menopause in a state of burnout where you're already anxious, you're already not sleeping well, you're already overwrought, adding those hormonal changes on sounds like it's a complete catastrophe, really.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Ayurveda does hold space to respect the like divine feminine form in all respects, which for me was a like lacking in a lot of other healthcare approaches. And one reason why I love Ayurveda so much, I feel like it has included these very in-depth and supportive protocols for women's health, for thousands of years. And it wasn't like left off the map, it's just like male only medical models or research that didn't include women. So for me, that was just so refreshing to come home to, and like everything just made so much sense. And then it was so much more than that as well. It was like, okay, I feel more whole. I can even love that I'm a woman, and I know how to take care of myself, so that it increased my self-confidence as well.
Yeah, and I think that's just talk to me a little bit more about using Ayurveda for boosting self-confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I think that if we're struggling with something that is out of balance, and Ayurveda is all about balance and harmony, and it's kind of like health is your natural birthright. That's your constitution. And so when we're out of that place, that's something situational and temporary we can look at. It's not like who you are. And we want to look at bringing support out of that. But if you've been in the like health and balance place, oh, my sweetheart, friend, I love having animals join in. So then it feels so derailing. And I find like if you've been having like vaginal dryness or hot flashes for years and years and no resolution and nothing's working, I mean, it's so demoralizing, and your self-esteem and confidence just starts to tank down. And so when you can latch onto something that like does work, you feel like is safe, is based on natural approaches, it's not just a new age fad, then you start to feel like, okay, I can build my life in a really purposeful way. I can take care of myself. I can take care of my family. And I think there's something nourishing too about, truthful knowledge and these like beautiful ancient teachings where it's almost like, I know you're like thirsty for it, and it's meeting your needs on a spiritual level too.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's the thing I have found. The older I've got and going down this shamanic path is really having a spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you,
Mhm.
is game changing for mindset. It's game changing for self-acceptance. And I think when your self-acceptance is at a good level, your confidence also can be. You're not so easily thrown off by external things.
Mhm. Yes. And one classic Ayurvedic practice that I've fallen in love with, and I still do, like 10 years later, is what we call abhyanga. And that translates to massage in Sanskrit. And it's generally referring to like self-massage that you do every day. It is like the number one lifestyle recommendation for hormonal balance. And this is really important at all stages of a woman's life for hormonal balance, but especially in menopause, because we produce estrogen in our skin tissue. And so that is one of those incredible preventive measures that you can do. But also like when I'm feeling extra depleted and I'm like, okay, I've been doing this practice for a long time. I feel like I've got my life back. I feel very vibrant and healthy. Like, I'm 39, but I don't fear menopause at all. I feel like I've got the tools and knowledge, but if I'm like traveling somewhere, I come back and I'm like crashing and I'm exhausted. Like the first thing I want to do is abhyanga, like, because I know what to do when I'm starting to get to that depleted place. And I didn't have those tools when I was younger, like in college. And then I would just stay there longer. And then that was like this vicious cycle that was, spiraling. So now I feel like I can nip things in the bud. I know what to do. And I'm like, okay, I don't fear like uncertainty as much, or I don't fear challenges in the same way I used to.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful. Is there's so much in there that you've said, is being able to be in touch with your body and yourself enough to know when you are being depleted, when your energy levels are dropping, when you're not feeling 100%. So you can catch that before it ends up being full-blown burnout, before it ends up being complete adrenal fatigue that takes months and months and months to recover from. I think that's really, really powerful. Could you share with us, Whitney, before we wrap up, for anybody who is listening who can't see the podcast, I have a dog on my lap, so we had an invader. What other holistic tools can women do themselves at home? Obviously, if they want to reach out for you for your Ayurveda, we're going to talk about how people can get in touch with you. But for holistic tools for women, kind of self-care stuff at home, what can you suggest that home things people can do to support themselves through the transition of perimenopause and menopause?
Yes, yeah, wonderful question. And I feel like starting with some kind of self-massage with whole organic or wildcrafted oils. You can just start by oiling the soles of your feet at night before you go to sleep. And there's thousands of nerve endings there. So it's, incredibly restorative. And you're also going to provide that like deep grounding nourishment to your body. And anything that can get you out of the stress response as a whole, I think is very helpful. And some of my other favorite Ayurvedic tools are like Ayurvedic herbs. So ones that are known to be hormonal normalizers, also ones that are adaptogens, really good for increasing your body's systemic resistance to stress. Shatavari is a classic one for menopause. And like women in India, for example, just eat that throughout their whole lifespan in general. It's in the asparagus family. So just having that in your system for years and years before you go through menopause will absolutely help you. And warm, moist, oily foods, having lots of nourishing, healthy fats. So just like looking at your diet and like checking in with yourself, like, how do you feel after eating? Do I feel really supported and nourished or not? And looking at any kind of self like body work as well, or schedule something where you can get like Ayurvedic massages or treatments. So marma points or self acupressure points are incredibly beneficial. And like there's one here that's great for hot flashes, the Li4 point. And if you are working some of those, you can activate deep healing within yourself. And also looking at routine, I feel like it's very Ayurvedic in the healthiest of ways. I mean, what works for you? So like having like the morning time is especially renowned in Ayurveda, called the Dinacharya, and just like have something you're doing for self-care before you're out the door. So like a morning walk. I see this very universally and open-minded, like any kind of meditation practice. It could just be a walking meditation. Having your self-massage and oiling practices. So you're starting off the day with mindfulness and nourishment. You're out of the stress response. And then you go into work, right? Or then whatever happens, you have that home place to come back to. And it's also like you're checking off so many self-care boxes. So no matter what happens in that day, you don't end the day looking back like, oh, I need that now, like in this deprivation state.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You shared such valuable information, but it is tending to self first at the start of the day, and it sets you up for a much better day. It's something that is a topic that comes up often here in the podcast. It's something I talk about as well. It's just so important to set the tone for your day in the morning. And like you say, to have a routine, and you can kind of, what's happening. So Whitney, this has been a really, really wonderful conversation. Thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with me and with the listeners. You have a free breakthrough session available for people. Could you just share a little bit more about that and how people can go about booking that with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that's available to anybody on the planet. I do virtual consultations nationally and internationally. And you can hop into the classes and programs page on my website at fourseasonsharmony.com, and you'll see there's a brief application process, and all of those responses are kept confidential. And I have some ongoing free classes as well. So you're welcome to just follow up for some deeper one-on-one support if you're feeling like you don't have enough that is established in your life to receive more for that solid foundation in women's health. and getting you feeling better. So I'm very happy to answer questions as well. So reach out anytime. And I'm so deeply honored that you invited me. I love your work, Emma, and I've been diving into it even more so recently, like preparing for our time together and supporting women from getting out of burnout and healthy boundaries. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here with me. This has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm sure I'm sure there will be a lot of women out there like me who were just blinkered about menopause and blinkered and just not knowing what to expect, because like we said at the beginning, nobody talks to you about it, nobody prepares you for it. So thank you for your honesty and for sharing with us. I'm going to pop the links to your website in the show notes. I'll also pop the links to your socials as well. And folks, if you're listening and you're going through menopause and you're struggling, you're in perimenopause, or even not quite yet, and you're thinking, actually, I really like the idea of pre-prepping for this, because I'm liking the idea of pre-prepping for this, please reach out to Whitney. She's an expert, and as you've heard today. So Whitney, thank you again for joining me.
My sincere pleasure. Thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you for being with us today, folks. As always, if you want to reach out, please hop over to Instagram at Emma O'Brien Coach and pop me a message. Let me know how you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you again same time next week. Bye for now.